Hi and welcome back to my channel. My name is Stacy if you're new here, and I am a NASM certified personal trainer as well as a dream vacations travel advisor, which means that I can help you plan your dream vacation with as much or as little assistance from me as you want. And today's video, I'm going to go through all of the books that I read in 2024. And just for a little bit of background, I drive a lot for work. I prioritize reading. I listen to a lot of audiobooks as my preferred format of book. And so I just have a lot more flexibility to be able to read a lot of books. So I've read 126 books this year, which is a lot, but I listen to a lot of my books. I tend to listen while I drive for work. I listen to books while I clean or crochet or just do a bunch of different other tasks. Sometimes I'll listen to books while I work out. So it just depends on what I'm doing, and sometimes I will prioritize watching TV over listening to books. It just depends on how I'm feeling, but for the most part, I tend to prioritize reading a lot, and I always read before I go to sleep. I fall asleep reading every single night. So I'm going to do this kind of in a rapid fire kind of style, just because there's a lot and I don't want this video to be a million years long. So, and then a lot of these were rereads, so I will notate that when I get to them, and a lot of them were series, so I'll kind of just go through. Most of these are in order of when I read them, but if for some reason the series or the author was split up between different books, I kind of grouped the author slash series all together so that I can just say all of these books by this author. So let's get into it after that ginormously long intro. So the first book I read was Iris Kelly Doesn't Date by Ashley Herring Blake. The next book I read was The Woman in Me by Britney Spears. This was a memoir. It was very interesting to hear her story of being like a childhood star. And then I finished up the whole Shadowhunter series by Cassandra Clare. These were all rereads, but 2 of her books. I read a lot of this series in 2023, so I was finishing it up at the beginning of 2024 with Ghosts of the Shadow Market, Clockwork Angel, Clockwork Prince, Clockwork Princess, Chain of Gold, Chain of Iron, and then Chain of Thorns was one I had not read yet. I love that world. I love the whole like love story. My favorite little series is I think it's Infernal Devices, which is the Clockwork Angel Prince and Princess with Jem, Tessa, and Will, that little love triangle, if you will, kind of a why choose moment, which is done so well in this series. And then I read Cassandra Clare's new book called Swordcatcher, which is not in the Shadowhunter world at all. It is a very different series, and it was a huge book. And all I remember is there was a lot of information. It's got a complex political system, so I just remember really having to focus in on that book. And there's another book coming in that series, so I feel like I will probably reread this book before reading the new one whenever it does come out. I think it comes out sometime in 2025, and I will probably reread it just because I did enjoy it, but it was just a lot all at once. So now that I have kind of an introduction to this new world, because all of Cassandra Clare's series before was like a low fantasy. I don't remember the exact like terminology, but it was a fantasy story set in modern world where they're kind of in secret with like regular humans and all of that. Whereas Swordcatcher was its own world. It was a high fantasy or epic fantasy. I don't remember the difference. I'll put it on the screen when I look it up. And it was good. It was just a lot of information because we're dealing with like a prince and the sword catcher, who is kind of the person who is supposed to kind of like a bodyguard to the prince. So that was a lot of fun. And then I read Bumpin' by Leslie Schrock. At the time I was trying to conceive, but now I've chosen to not do that, just for reasons. And that one was good. And then I read a handful of different books during that time, and this one was the only one I finished of all of them, because they kind of gave similar information, and I did not feel the need to continue reading and reading the same things over and over. And then I read None of This Is True by Lisa Jewell, and then The Family Upstairs by Lisa Jewell, which both were a lot of fun. It was kind of like a mystery suspense-ish type of book. And then by Stephen King, I read The Outsider, Polly, and If It Bleeds. It's kind of an interconnected series, and they kind of go in order, but I think I read The Outsider first. No, I read Holly first, I think. I don't know. I feel like I read them out of order. I don't remember. That was definitely way earlier in the year, so I don't remember exactly what it was, like what order I read it in. But I did love the story a lot. I'm not like the biggest Stephen King fan when it comes to the books, just because I like romance and fantasy a lot more, but having the option for different types of fantasy books, it's not just romance in the plot, is a lot of fun. I like his writing. In 2023, I read Fairy Tale, which was so good. My husband liked that one as well. I just like, he's one of those authors that tells and describes a lot in the stories rather than they do a lot of show, not tell. That's what I mean, which is a lot of fun. I tried watching The Outsider on, I think, Max, the TV show, but because of how the books are written, there's just very little dialogue in the show. So for me, that type of show is not very engaging, even though I know the story. I knew where it was going, but remembering how the book was, there's a lot of detail in like each POV rather than dialogue. So translating that to a movie or a TV show is just difficult because you're just watching a lot of things, and there's just not enough to keep the audience engaged, in my opinion. Then I read 2 books by Emily Henry, Beach Read and Funny Story. Funny Story was a lot of fun. That one I read more recently than Beach Read. I actually don't remember a lot of Beach Read off the top of my head. I think if I went and looked at it a little, like even just the cover of it, I could remember little bits and pieces, but I don't remember a lot of it. But Funny Story was super cute, and I really enjoyed it. And then I read several books by Ali Hazelwood. Love Theoretically, Under One Roof, Stuck With You, Check-in Mate, Below Zero, The Love Hypothesis, Love on the Brain, Not in Love, and that's all of the ones by Ali Hazelwood that I read. I love her books so much. Actually, there was one more. It's a Christmas book, but it's part of like this Christmas collection I will get to later in the video. But I love all of Ali Hazelwood's books. I love that all of her characters are in like STEM fields, which is science, technology, engineering, and math, and how it kind of gives the difficulties that women in those fields have while also having a romance plot in it. And my favorite of all of those books was Check-in Mate. I loved that one, and I don't know why I loved that one specifically so much. I don't know anything about chess. This one was about like 2 chess prodigies, basically. And then Not in Love was really good, but it was very different in terms of like the spice level. It was a very spicy book compared to the rest of them. And then I read all of the Pretty Little Liars series, which I read Pretty Little Liars and Flawless, which are the first 2 books in the series many, many years ago. I watch the show at least every other year. It's one of my comfort rewatches that I watch. I watched it when it was airing on TV. I watched every week when it was on TV coming out. And so I thought after watching the show, reading the entire series, I did not know there were 15 books in this series. So it starts with a prequel, which comes from Allie's point of view, which kind of gives you a background to who she is as a character in the books, which is very different than in the TV show. So there are significant differences in all of these books compared to the TV show and the direction that they took. So one weird thing about the Pretty Little Liars book, because I purchased it on my Nook, so with Barnes & Noble, their ebooks, and they updated the file, and for some reason they tried to modernize it with references to modern artists, music, social media like TikTok, and different little slang sayings, but they didn't edit it very well. So there were still different things like we have a landline when nobody uses a landline, but they did at the time that these books came out. So it was just weird reading it that way. And then, so here's all of the books listed in order. We've got Ali's Little Secret, Pretty Little Liars, Flawless, Perfect, Undeniable, Pretty Little Secrets, Wicked, Killer, Heartless, Wanted, Twisted, Ruthless, Stunning, Burned, and Crushed. So I want to say around book 6 or 7 is kind of when the story really splits off and is a completely separate story as compared to the TV show. So we still have our main characters, Arya, Spencer, Emily, and Hannah, and then of course Allie. And then we have a few other characters, Mona. So Mona was the initial A that they found, like they discovered in the books. A lot of characters that we know and love from the show end up dying a lot sooner in the books than we would have than they did in the show. And then some characters who were kind of background minor characters and had a whole different storyline have more of a upfront prominent storyline in the books than in the TV show. And then there's like a whole book essentially where they are on a week-long cruise with their school, which is wild. However, I mean, they're in a very wealthy town in Virginia. I think it's Virginia. But overall, it was a lot of fun. By the end of the book series, there was a lot of twists that I did not expect. Throughout the entire series, you know who A is the entire time. It's more of the four main characters, Hannah, Arya, Spencer, and Emily, trying to convince the authorities that this is A and we need to look into it a lot more. So they are basically being tormented and trying to like get people to believe them throughout the entire series. Different plot lines happen and things like that. So I read a bunch of books by Sarah J. Maas, pretty much her entire universe. Most of them were a reread. I read a majority of these books in 2023, but I reread them when my friend decided to read them for the first time. And so I love the books. Not a huge fan of the author, so I'm going to just do a quick rapid fire of the books, just because I don't want to give too much time to her. So I read the Crescent City series, basically when the third book came out earlier in January, which is House of Earth and Blood, House of Sky and Breath, House of Flame and Shadow. I read all of those kind of back to back to back. And then as for my rereads, I reread all of ACOTAR and all of Throne of Glass. So A Court of Thorns and Roses, A Court of Mist and Fury, A Court of Wings and Ruin, A Court of Frost and Starlight, A Court of Silver Flames, which I think on my reread only read half the book. Don't remember why I didn't finish it, to be honest. And then Throne of Glass, Assassin's Blade, Throne of Glass, Crown of Midnight, Heir of Fire, Queen of Shadows, Tower of Dawn, Empire of Storms, and Kingdom of Ash. I actually managed to read Kingdom of Ash twice in 2024 because I finished my first read through at the beginning of January before I read Crescent City and then reread it. I'm actually in the process of finishing it up right now. I have like 4 hours left on my audiobook. I don't remember exactly. And then another series that basically is the entire series is a reread, first time reading it as an adult, is the Harry Potter series. And I'm not going to give too much time on this other than I love the series, hate the author, and also really enjoyed rereading them as an adult just because of how I read them as a kid. I read them multiple times. Every time a new book came out, I reread the entire series. Books before it, every time a movie came out, I read the movie. And then it's so funny as an adult, I can kind of distinctly pick out different things, especially with the problematic author. I can see the themes of those problems in the books, but it was the series that got me back into reading. So I read 2 books by Frida McFadden. I'm not a big fan of like thriller suspense, but these 2 books my husband and I listened to in the car on road trips. So Ward D and The Inmate, both were so good and kind of left you guessing the entire book, which is so good. And then These Silent Woods by Kimmy Cunning Grant. I remember little bits and pieces of that book. It was another suspense book. They're not my favorite like genres, so they're good and intriguing enough that I'm going to finish them typically, or at least these ones that I did read this year. Then I read Red Rising twice. Just the first book. I haven't continued on in the series. I want to, I just haven't gotten to it. By Pierce Brown. I read the regular audio and then the graphic audio, which was interesting. Between the two, I prefer regular audiobooks versus the graphic audios. And then I read 2 books by Rebecca Yarros, Fourth Wing, which was a reread I actually listened to in the car with my husband on a road trip, which was really, I love this series. Like, that's good. It's so good. And then The Things We Leave Unfinished, which is not part of the Empyrean series. It is just a standalone romance, which was super cute, and I really enjoyed the story. It took me a minute to like get my like to process like what was going on in the book, because it kept jumping back in multiple POVs. So we had the present day MMC, FMC POVs, and then they were kind of writing or finishing up a kind of memoir love story for the FMC's grandmother or great grandmother, one of the two. And they had to go through a bunch of letters between the grandmother and I think the grandfather. And then we find like out that there's like a whole twist, and the person that thought they knew wasn't that person. So it was super cute, and I really enjoyed that. And then I read 2 books by Emily McIntyre, the Hooked and Scarred. I'm not a huge dark romance fan, and I saw that these were fairy tale retellings, and they are done very creatively. But I don't know that I will continue the entire series. They're all standalones, so they don't necessarily need to have, you don't need to read one to know like the next story. They're all different. So like Hooked is a Peter Pan retelling and Scarred is a Lion King retelling. So it kind of has like the characters from the fairy tales basically in a story, in a dark romance story kind of setting, with like little bits and pieces of the previous, like the fairy tale lore in the story, kind of in the background, I guess. Then I read Mixed Signals by B.K. Borison, and then also Love Light Farms by B.K. Borison, which I don't think I actually have on this list, so that makes my number of books 127 books, which Love Light Farms was a reread. I read it last year last year for Christmas, and then again this Christmas season. And then Love in Tandem by Becca Kinsner. It's a book kind of about a couple doing a tandem bike ride contest. It's like a long distance, and they have run into a bunch of issues. And then Right on Cue by Fallon Ballard. Here's a handful of different romance books. The Roommate Pact by Allison Ashley. The Love Game by Elena Armas. I don't know if I said her name right. And then 2 interconnected romance books by Chloe Lies. Two Wrongs Make a Right, Better Hate Than Never. And then I read the Magicians series by Lev Grossman with The Magicians, The Magician King, and The Magician Land. I think the series is better. I hardly ever think that the series or TV show or movie is better than the book, but in this case, it kind of is, which is, I don't know how they managed to do that. It's on Netflix. And then Will They or Won't They by Ava Wilder. I'm Glad My Mom Died by Jeanette McCurdy. This one, major ED, eating disorder trigger warning, so if you're sensitive to that, I would be cautious, but overall it is a really powerful story on just basically her entire experience being a childhood star. And then I read a duology by Roseanne A. Brown, A Song of Wraith and Ruin, and A Song of Psalm and Silence. And then Just Like Home by Sarah Gailey, Obsessed by James Patterson and James O. Orne. Those 2 were kind of like a thriller, suspenseful book. I'm not a huge like horror fan or like suspense, but I was trying to get into like the Halloween vibes. I still went back to a lot of romances during that time, so I didn't listen to a lot of or read a lot of suspenseful books. And then The Pumpkin Spice Cafe by Lori Gilmore, which was really cute. And then a couple of books by Lynn Painter, The Do-Over and Betting on You. Those two are for sure YA romances. They were cute. I wish those books were out when I was a kid. I would have loved them. When I was a teenager, I would have loved them. And then a bunch of books by Carla Luna. So she has 4 different trilogies of romance stories. So the first one is the Blackwood Cellars series, which is they're all interconnected, so they're kind of just following different characters. Blue Hawaiian, Red Velvet, and White Wedding. I read Red Velvet first and fell in love with her writing style. She's definitely one of my favorite authors of this year. And then those kind of follow characters in working with or like family of Blackwood Cellars, which is a winery, vineyard. A lot of the characters are in that family that owns the vineyard, and then kind of their little love story branched off from there. And then following one of the cousins from White Wedding in starting into Romancing the Ruins series with Field Rules, Troy Story, and Tour Wars. These books were all about different archaeological dig sites, which was really cool because then you kind of get a little bit of history and just a little different type of story than you would have a regular romance. So these were all set at different places. Field Rules was set in France or Greece. I don't remember. And then Troy Story was set in Pompeii, and then Tour Wars was set in also Pompeii. But I don't know. I don't remember off the top of my head exactly where they were. One of them was Greece, I think. One of them was in Turkey. That's what it was. It was Greece, Turkey, and Pompeii, which they were all a lot of fun. There's one singular character that remains in all of them. In the first 2 books, he's a minor character, so you kind of get a smidge of character development throughout the 3 books, and it's just a lot of fun. I really love her style of writing, and also all of her characters, the main characters, have Latino ethnicity background. I mean, not all of the characters, but at least one of the main characters typically do in her books, and I really enjoy that a lot. And then I'm currently finishing up Santa Maybe, which she just released, and it's the beginning of another trilogy. I don't know for sure if it's going to be all of them are going to be Christmas books. The Blackwood Cellars White Wedding, that one takes place during Christmas, and the wedding is just before Christmas, but it's not the entire plot. Whereas Santa Maybe is kind of takes place around Christmas. It's a whole fake dating plot situation, and it is so far really good. And then I read Kiss Her Once for Me by Alison Colquhoun, the entire Caraval series by Stephanie Garber, Caraval Legendary Finale. I loved that series so much. It was so whimsical and just a lot of fun and so good. And then I read the Once Upon a Broken Heart series by Stephanie Garber as well, which is a trilogy with Once Upon a Broken Heart, The Ballad of Never After, The Curse for True Love. And then I read When We're 30 by Casey Dembowski. That one was a lot of fun. It was basically about these 2 college roommates or college friends who made a pact that when they were 30, if they were not married, then they would get married themselves. And it turned into a fake marriage into a real marriage kind of thing. It was fun. And then the Christmas in Eldovia series by Jenny Holiday with A Princess for Christmas and Duke Actually. And then there's a third one called So This Is Christmas, which I read last year. Did not read that one this year. I just read A Princess for Christmas and Duke Actually. Those 2 are so cute. Definitely one of my favorite Christmas books series that I have read. And then Wreck the Halls by Tessa Bailey, Royal Holiday by Jasmine Guillory, and then the Christmas Notch series by Julie Murphy and Sierra Simone with A Merry Little Meet Cute, Snow Place Like LA, Jolly Ever After, Seas and Greetings, and A Jingle Bell Mingle. A Merry Little Meet Cute was a reread. I read it last year. This entire series is a very inclusive LGBTQ story, and it's the entire series has a lot of spice in it. So if you don't like that, I'd steer clear. But it kind of gives off the let's not demonize sex kind of vibes and just empowering people to be as they are. And I really loved the entire like overarching message of that in the series. I probably won't read them again. However, my favorite of the series was a Jingle Bell Mingle. That one was really cute. They had like a subplot of trying to like find a story in the town that they were in, and I really liked that. And then the like I think it's Under the Mistletoe collection. It's a collection of Amazon stories, and they're all really short stories, but they're all different books. So we have Cruel Winter with You by Ali Hazelwood, Merry Ever After by Tessa Bailey, All My Elf by Olivia Dade, Merriment and Mayhem by Alexandria Bellafour, and Only Santa's in the Building by Alexis Daria. And this series was cute, but they were so short that I felt like there should have been more to it, but there wasn't. And I really wished that. Do you remember? I don't know if anybody else did this or it was just me. When you're in like elementary school, high school, middle school, whatever, in school age, where you would have a notebook with your friends and you would just start like a story and then hand it off to the next person. They would kind of take where you left off and write their own little thing and just keep passing it around to everybody. Half the time it was nonsense because we were kids, but that's beside the point. Like, I feel like they had an opportunity to do something like that where like the first book listed in the collection, they're Amazon originals, so they're only on Kindle Unlimited and Audible, but they definitely had a missed opportunity where the first one listed was Cruel Winter with You by Ali Hazelwood. She could have started the story, and then the next book by Tessa Bailey could have just continued on that story from where the first one left off and put her own writing, her own spin on it, her own little bit, and then following from there with all the other authors, they could have made one cohesive romance rather than all these little tiny mini books. Like they were all probably under 100 pages each. It was cute, they were cute, but I don't think they were worth it, to be honest. But and then one more I read this year was Meet Me Under the Mistletoe by Jenny Bayliss. And yeah, that's all 227 books I read this year. Sometimes small books make a big difference. And then I don't really set goals much for the next year in terms of like reading. I'll like put each month, I'll put a ton of books on a like my list for what I want to read that month. So like I'll have my monthly TBR, and then if I don't read all the books, not a big deal. They will, whatever I don't read will roll over into the next month or just be on a standing TBR that I want to read eventually. So I don't really have reading goals. I think I read barely over 100 books in 2023, so I definitely read more this year, but some months I read way more than others. Like in October, I read like 17 books, I think. And this month, I think I read like 16, but I read all of those super short stories under the Mistletoe collection, those super short stories. So that contributed to the number of books I read. And some months I will have like several super long, complicated epic fantasies. So it's going to take me longer to get through. So it just depends. And I don't want to completely put I need to read this many books in a year on it because I read for fun and I do a lot of reading while I crochet or just other like hobbies and household tasks. So I just read what I read when I read it. So yeah, don't let anybody else tell you how many books you should have read or that you read too much or there's no way you could have possibly read these number of books. Everybody has different priorities and specific time, extra time, free time, leisure time in their life, and different things going on. I don't have kids, so I don't have to worry about taking care of littles, but I do have a ton of free time when I'm driving, and when I decide to crochet and my husband and I aren't watching a TV show and he's playing a video game. So I get a lot of that, like reading in during that. And I read every single night before I go to bed and sometimes while I'm working out. So it's just more of a priority for me. And sometimes not everyone has the same priorities, and that's okay. So I'm going to go ahead and end this video here. Not sure how long it's going to be. Hopefully it's not like an hour, but I did read a lot of books. And yeah, if you would like to schedule or fill out my free quote form and work with me, and I can help you plan a dream vacation, I'll leave that link in the description box below. I'm going to go ahead and end this video here, and thank you so much for watching. Please subscribe to my channel. My goal is to reach as close to 500 subscribers by the end of the year, and we're pretty much there. Please subscribe to my channel. I'll have a lot more travel content, Disney content, books, my monthly book wrap-ups, and my week of workouts. And please comment your favorite book of the year, like my video. Engaging with my video will help get it out to other viewers. And thank you so much for watching. I will see you in my next one. Bye, guys.